Okay, class, we're going to make a class called book, public class book, and the fields or attributes of a book that we would want to keep track of would be the title, author, ISBN number, number of pages, and the price. Those are the fields or attributes or properties of a book. Now, obviously, there could be many more, genre, for example, but let's say that we're going to keep it at that for now. Notice that they're all private. By making them private, I make it impossible to modify or access them except with methods that I'm going to add to this class. So that safeguards the data, which of course is the key part of your objects. Now, normally after specifying what the fields are and typing them all, as we have done here, you would create one or more constructors. I'm going to make two. I hit Source on the menu and select Generate Constructor Using Fields. In the dialog box that pops up, leave all of these boxes checked off and hit OK. And there's your constructor. This is the so-called parameterized constructor, which, as you can see, has parameters for each and every one of our fields in a book object, and it will set each of the fields in that book object. It also contains a call to super. You won't see that in our textbook, but that's a call to the superclass of our class book here, and it's a class called object, capital O object. The capital O object class is at the top of the hierarchy. It's the superclass of all classes in Java. We'll talk more about that in the future. I'd like to make another constructor, as well as this parameterized constructor. We'll make another one, source, generate constructor from superclass. When we select that and press enter, we get another constructor, and this one has no arguments inside the parentheses, which is why we call this the no-arg constructor. This is the no-arg constructor. I'll even put a comment in to that effect. This is our no-arg. CTOR is a good short form for constructor. It also has a call to super, but with no arguments, it doesn't do any setting of attribute values. Why would you want this constructor? Sometimes you'll want to make an object when you don't know what the values of the fields are for that object. So this will make a default object that you can later assign values to with some of the methods that we're going to write coming up right now. So we've got two constructors. Usually the next thing that you'll want to do is choose source, generate getters and setters. Check off all of these checkboxes for our 5 fields and hit OK. And that will generate a setter and a getter for every field. Now, if I didn't want a particular getter or setter, I could expand this. And for example, let's say I didn't want the setter for the string. Well, I could do that. Okay, and I could do that for all of these. But we'll set them all on. And when I hit OK, just like that, Eclipse gives us all 10 setters and getters. We get a setter and a getter for each of our properties or field values. Notice the structure of these particular special methods. Here's a getter for the title. The getter for the title returns a string, and it returns the title. Notice the naming of the method. Get title, but capitalize the first character after the get. So there are actually editors, Java editors, that can examine a file, and by seeing this type of syntax can determine that, oh, this object must have a field called title, which is of type string. Okay, that's really what that tells you. Now here's the setter for the title. The setter is return type void. It doesn't return anything. It is used to set the value of the title. You can change the value after you've initially set it with the default constructor, or you can use it to set the value of the title in an object that you created with the no-arc constructor. Notice that although it's type void, this one has to have a parameter for the value to assign to that title. And in similar fashion, we have a getter and a setter for all of the other fields. And notice that same pattern for the price field. It's set price with a capital P and get price with a capital P. Your getters are a return type that matches the attributes value, its type, and then your setters are all type void. Now there's one more very special method that I want to add to this class. So I'm going to hit source, generate toString. Now the toString method is a special one. It serves to display the values in the attributes of an object. And I'm going to leave all of these checked off and hit OK. And there it is. It automatically generates the toString method for us. The toString method, as you can see, returns a string. And the string is going to basically show the values in the attributes, what the values of the attributes are in that object. I'm going to clean this up just a little bit. I'm just going to take away book and title, or book and the square brackets. We know it's a book. And then at the end, I'm going to take away the closing square bracket here. So I'll just simplify the definition a little bit. But notice that it returns a string, and I've got the return statement there. In some other cases, you might want to create a string and develop a string with concatenation and then return the string. So you might have several lines of code in your toString method if you want to make it a custom method. The default that Eclipse makes for you generally always looks like this. So here we have a definition for a class called book, which we can use to create book objects. Now, I want to emphasize this class has no main method. This is a data class. It's for creating book objects. We are defining a new data type called book that we can use to make book objects with. And we would want to do that if, for example, we worked at a bookstore, or if we had a personal library that we wanted to keep track of all of our books with. We could use this book class to create a library for all of our books. Let's take a look at how we might use this in an executable program. We have another program here called, this one is an actual program. This one has a main method, as you can see. I've called it testbook, and I've created 4 book objects here. We've created a book called Scary, a Stephen King book, and I looked up all these values online. I think all of these values for the attributes here are about right, I think. Handmaid's Tale, a good book, and currently a movie that's popular, or a TV series that's popular. And then there's a book, Golden House by Rushdie. 3 books. Now, all these first 3 are using the parameterized constructor. Obviously, you can see we've got parameters here. But this one is not. That one's using the no-arc constructor. I've created an object, but I haven't specified the field values for that object. But we can do that next. Here's an example of how we can do that. We use the setters. We run all the setters to assign values to those fields. So I'm going to do this for our Java book. Set title, set author, set pages. That's the ISBN number, and unfortunately it's $175. It's a pricey book, but it is a good book. If you're going to be a Java programmer, you want to hang on to this book. It's a great reference book for you. Make it part of your personal library. Okay, so now we have fully defined 4 objects of type book. What could we do with those? Well, we could make an array list of books. I'm going to make an array list of books called books, and then I'm going to use the add method for that object books, books.add, and I'll add our 4 books by name. So now we have an array list. Now I want to cycle through those with a loop, so I'm going to create an accumulator variable called total cost, give it an initial value of 0, and then I'm going to print a little bit of a heading here, and then I'm going to use an enhanced for loop, or for each loop, down below that, here it is, to go through the array list element by element and display all of the books. So here's how you do that. Book BK. Now I chose BK. This name here could be anything at all. This is the name of the array list. Now here's a very important line. Systemout.println BK. All I'm doing is printing out the name of the book object here as I go through the loop. Well, that runs the toString method by default. That's the real value of the toString method. You don't have to be explicit. I could have said bk.toString, but it's not necessary. Just bk will automatically run the toString method. Keep that one in mind. That's a useful one that you will need in the future. Then I want to print a blank line. Then I want to accumulate the prices. So I use the getter for the price, book.getPrice. That'll retrieve the price of each book and add it onto the total cost accumulator. And then finally, we'll display the output down here with a printf. So I think we do have the output down below. Actually, I don't really need this print line here. I'm going to comment that out and run this again. No need to double space this. And here's the output. All of these lines here are being produced by the toString method. And then here's the total. Well, that's a decent example of how you can create an object definition with a class. You define the attributes and methods in the class for that object. Then you keep in mind, though, that that is not an executable. This is just a new data type that you're defining. Then you can use that new data type in an executable program. For example, we used it here in the main method.